And welcome to the Mahtab Aziz Celebrity Lawyer Show at this fantastic time of 7 p.m. And our guest today is a distinguished barrister, senior barrister, I should say. He might take offense if I don't add that. So that's Mr. David Martin Sperry.
Good evening.
Good evening, David. I hope I got your double-barreled surname correct.
You have, it's a sawn-off double-barreled name, and which is actually quite useful in criminal circles.
Yes, well, we associate such double-barreled names with the landed gentry, so I'm sure you've got some sort of land lying around somewhere. So massive.
Oh yes, if only, if only.
Right, well, it's great having you on, David, and thank you for taking the time out. Now we're going to be discussing the state of the criminal justice system, of which you're very familiar.
I have to say, I have been knocking around the criminal courts. I'm now actually in my 49th year of practice.
Oh my goodness.
Which means that apparently in October, when I'll be 50 years call, somebody's had the idea of having a party. But for the time being, if I survive that long, yes, I have been knocking around the courts for quite some time.
All right, that's it'll be your golden anniversary of being at the bar.
Well, I don't know. I was called in 1971, and this is now 2021, and by my mathematics, I think that makes it 50 years and counting.
Right.
Absolutely no intention of hanging my wig up.
Oh, that's great.
Because what I do is endlessly interesting.
Yes.
It's for others to say whether it's endlessly useful to them. But from my point of view, I wouldn't dream of hanging my wig up. What can I say?
Well, I think the nature of the job is such that it just develops a passion in people, I think, and you're a sort of a great example of that. Each case is different, each scenario is different, and it's a bit of a chess game and a challenge. I would have thought.
It's extraordinary the sets of facts that you get sent. And once you establish, in a sense, a reputation for being a facts man as opposed to a lawman, I mean, I always sort of boast about knowing no law at all, which is not strictly true. But actually, what interests me is a set of facts, and I get into a set of facts, and if there's any little bit that doesn't make sense to me, that's where I start digging. And then when you dig, some of the things you find which show that what is being suggested is simply not correct. It's astonishing the number of times that you can show that actually they've got it completely wrong. And the reason that you fall into that is precisely because you are looking. You're looking for something that isn't right. And an awful lot of people these days, they get a set of papers, they read them, they say, this is what the case is about. And they don't look at what they've got at all critically. And consequently, if there is a major mistake that's been made, it just gets missed. And once you get a major mistake missed, you get what's called in the trade a miscarriage. And there shouldn't be any. Of course there shouldn't, but there are. And they usually come about not because anybody's interested in getting the wrong person convicted, but because there is a coincidence that they can't buy, and they say, well, it must be him because look, he's wearing, or he's got the right shoes. I mean, I've got a particular case that I'm working on, which is a murder case that the one of the people present at the scene of the murder was undoubtedly wearing a pair of size 11 and then a particular brand of shoe of well-known trainer.
Sure.
And not that well-known, but fairly well-known.
Sure.
And they found my fellow, who undoubtedly had driven somebody across the country, and that other person was undoubtedly involved. My fellow was just the driver, and he sat in a pub and waited until he was due to drive him back again. And they found that one of the people who had attended at the scene of the murder was wearing a pair of size 11 of these particular shoes. When they looked in my guy's cupboard, they didn't find the shoes, but when they looked in his father's cupboard, they found a pair of size 11 of that type. Thank you. End of case.
Right.
Nonsense. First of all, he doesn't take 11s, he takes 12s. Secondly, they were his father's shoes, and his father was actually wearing them on the day the other side of the country. Right. And it was just a horrible, horrible coincidence. The shoes were unusual enough. And what it caused is it caused the police simply to stop investigating. They took their thinking caps off. And the fact that, you know, my guy didn't match the description at all. So I then get investigating, and I have found who the miscreant was, who does in fact take size 11, and glory be, he was seen by police to be wearing a new pair of shoes. Well, of course he was, because he wanted to get rid of the old ones, and so on and so forth. I mean, little things like that, little coincidences like that can change absolutely everything, and they lead to miscarriages, and people misunderstand it. They somehow think that lawyers are all sort of massively overpaid, and all they're looking for is to find some technical loophole through which everyone will leap.
Well, I think the O.J. Simpson trial has something probably to add to that sort of image of the lawyer with the black glove, you know, and a lot of dramatics, you know.
If the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. It was a lovely line. Now, I don't know anything about that case, so I'm not going to be tempted to pass comment on it. But cases like that produce lovely lines. And whoever thought of "if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit" goes to the top of my class for advocacy, because that is, it's a lovely line, and it's stuck. In the event, it seems to have worked in that case. Whether you know, I know nothing about the case, so I'm not going to be tempted to say anything about it.
Sure. Okay. But what about, you know, we've got this Criminal Cases Review Commission, you know, probably like that. But I imagine they can't really fathom the more complex cases that really require a lot of digging, as you said.
Well, the CCRC, Criminal Case Review Commission, are actually very good. And they have good resources. And if you need something to be examined by a particular expert, of which there are only 3 in the country, the CCRC will get hold of one of them. And so, but the trouble with the CCRC is that they only come in after an appeal has failed. And part of their remit is, we will not look at something that the Court of Appeal has looked at and has adjudicated. We've got to look at something else.
Yes.
If perish the thought, the Court of Appeal gets it wrong, which I'm afraid to say does happen, that can tie the hands of the CCRC. But essentially what we're all concerned with is making sure that, certainly from the defense point of view, the wrong people don't get convicted. From a lot of people see that as, oh, well, here's a whole bunch of lawyers trying to get criminals off. That's completely the wrong take.
Yes.
And the right take is that we should all be concerned if anybody is wrongly convicted for two reasons. A, they are wrongly convicted, and the knock-on effect of that on them, on their family, on their community can be huge. And of course, two, if the wrong person is convicted, it follows that the right person is still out there and, you know, maybe doing it again.
Yes.
So these things are important, and they're not understood by an awful lot of people.
Yes.
I mean, I have to say, a lot of people, if you've been knocking around as long as I have at the criminal bar, you're well used to the question, how can you defend somebody that you know is guilty?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is you don't know that he's guilty because, you know, we're not God. And if we were there and we see them either doing it or not doing it, we then can't represent them anyhow.
Yes.
But every now and again, I mean, people say, I have been wrongly accused. Are they telling the truth? Well, I have a way of dealing with people, and I arrive at a new client and I will say to him, I've got two things to tell you. And they look at me like this. And I say, the first of those things is, I don't believe a word you're telling me. And they recoil, shock, horror.
Yes.
Oh, no, I don't want you. And I said, no. I said there were two things.
Yes.
The second thing I've got to tell you is I don't disbelieve a word you're telling me. And they look at me in slight confusion. And I then say, that's not my territory to believe or disbelieve. That's what those 12 people out there are going to do. They're the jury. They're going to decide. What I'm here to do is to see what you're saying and to question it, to advise you. I mean, sometimes what I'm told is it's as good as the moon is made of blue cheese. And, you know, I say, well, look, I've never actually been to the moon myself. I don't know that it's not made of blue cheese. But I have to say, if you think we're going to persuade those 12 people out there that the moon is made of blue cheese, all I can say is I think we're going to have a very, very hard time doing it. And I would advise you to have a good look and see whether you don't want to plead guilty here or not. And fine. Every now and again, you find out that the moon is in fact made of blue cheese, or the equivalent. You find out that everyone has been fooled by a coincidence, a horrible, horrible coincidence. And, you know, if you don't unfathom, if that's not the wrong word, that coincidence, if you don't fathom that coincidence out, no one else is going to. And sometimes people say, well, a case is like a puzzle, and you members of the jury, you can't expect every single little piece to fit. Well, actually, you can. And if there's a little piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit, that is where your good criminal barrister will be in there saying, why doesn't that fit? And he'll get in there and start digging away like a little mole into precisely that hole. And all of a sudden, he will find a cavern that no one else has found. And of course, the reason no one else has found it is because no one else is looking for it.
Yes.
That's the point. It's not that we are brilliantly clever. It's just that we have a way of looking at a set of facts. And if something doesn't fit, you immediately want to know, why doesn't that fit? Why? I mean, the dog that didn't bark in the night, you know, that's one of Sherlock Holmes's famous, The Hound of the Baskervilles. It's one of his famous stories. The dog that didn't bark in the night. Why didn't it bark in the night? Answer whatever it is.
Yes.
So, sorry, I'm probably talking too much, but
it's happy to hear your words of
well,
wisdom.
it's trying to explain to you the importance of what we do. without sort of, sounding pompous and self-satisfied, which people always think that barristers are pompous and self-satisfied. Answer, I don't know any like that. What I do know is a whole lot of people who are committed to looking at a set of facts or a set of whatever it is and getting to the truth.
Yes.
And that is the value. And one of the great problems in the modern age is that the things that were set up after the war, set up by Churchill, and his opponent was Attlee. And Churchill and Attlee, Churchill for the Conservative, Attlee for the Labour Party. I'm sorry?
Peace in our time, Attlee.
Peace in our time. But once we've got peace in our time, the next thing that was set up was the National Health Service, the free health, free education, and free access to the law.
Yeah.
And that was so that the common man could have those sort of things, take those sort of things for granted. And the common man needed that. I say the common man, you can't refer to, it's hardly a label that you can give these days, but all of that was available. And what we now have is that the legal aid service has been so cut back that access to it is hugely diminished. And the people practicing there are, for many a year, I could have earned more cleaning windows than doing legal aid cases. I mean, I don't clean windows because I'd probably be rubbish at cleaning windows, and I do legal aid cases because I enjoy them enormously. But as a way of earning money, I would simply say, if I was a young barrister now, and I encourage all young barristers to come to the criminal bar because the work is so fascinating, and I'm sure that remuneration will pick up. But at the moment, people can't pay their bills. So young barristers leave the bar, or they leave the criminal bar at the rate of knots, and they say, well, I'm going to do something that pays more, such as, I don't know, personal injury or divorce or whatever. And they leave the criminal bar, and that's a tragedy, absolute tragedy.
And I think a false picture was sort of painted by some tabloids. I remember some years ago when they printed their top 5 highest earning criminal barristers, and the figures were like 600,000, 500,000. And the thing is, they were like elite sort of in the elite sort of league of barristers who had very, very exceptional cases. But the picture painted was as if all these barristers earned sort of similar amount of money in the criminal bar, which I think was totally wrong and a false sort of picture painted of the
I've been doing nothing but criminal work for the whole of my career.
Yeah.
And every now and again you get a private case. Most of the stuff I do a lot of, as it happens, quite a lot of pro bono work these days, simply because it's there, it needs doing, and it pleases me to do it. I mean, it's simply because it's very interesting work.
Yeah.
And I will do it because it needs doing. If it pays, whoopee. If it doesn't pay, as they say in France, tant pis. Which the French are too bad. But you do the work. Yeah. But I suppose at my advanced years, I'm no longer concerned about earning money. Not that I have any, but it's just that your priorities change. And I think what's happening at the bottom end of the criminal bar at the moment is tragic. Yeah. You get so many good people who come to the criminal bar because it's work that's worth doing. I mean, it really is worth doing. And then they leave it because they've got, they can't pay their bills. And they go to something more lucrative. Yes. And then people think, oh, well, you're a barrister, you're a criminal barrister, you must have made a huge amount of money and you just do things in order to get richer.
Yeah.
Ho, ho, ho is all I can say to that one.
I'll just tell you a little story about, some many years ago when I was, freshly into the legal profession. And I remember going to the Crown Court and in front of me was, you have that space outside a court. And there were two barristers there. One was a prosecutor, one was a defense counsel. And there was a chatting away as I sort of entered into this small sort of space. And one of them was saying, "It's simply outrageous, isn't it? It's simply outrageous." And the other time was saying, "Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's absolutely terrible." And I thought they were talking about some case or some result or something. As I leaned over, they were actually moaning about the fact that the evening standard had cost 50p. The price had been raised to 50p, and I was really surprised and sort of having a chuckle at hearing that. But normally you associate that sort of language with sort of their sort of reaction to a sort of terrible sort of happening or matter that didn't go their way, sort of thing. But I thought that was very, very sort of the old image of the pompous barrister was definitely.
Well, I mean, I would like to think that, we just don't do pompous, full stop. Yeah. I mean, I dare say, I'm sure there are some pompous lawyers, but...
many years ago, about 20 years ago. Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. David, we're just coming up to our first break. So obviously, as usual, fascinating talking to each other. So I'd like you to stay with us. We're going to carry on after this short break.
Yep. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
मिनहाज वेलफेयर फाउंडेशन में आपका अतिया जिंदगी की उम्मीद आपकी मदद से मुमकिन हुआ। दुनिया भर में 30 लाख से ज्यादा खवातीन, बुजुर्गों और बच्चों तक साफ पानी की फ्राहमी, मुतासरा इलाकों में हंगामी इमदाद, यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चों की दादरसी। इस साल हम आपके ताउन से और आगे बढ़ना चाहते हैं। अपनी ज़कात, सदकात और खैरात के जरिए इन मंसूबों का हिस्सा बनिए। अभी कॉल कीजिए 0300 3030 777 या हमारी वेबसाइट विजिट करें www.minhajwelfare.org।
Here at Duncan Lewis Solicitors, we specialize in immigration and family law. We have a proven track record of successful applicants who we've helped secure permanent residency for. From spouse visas to seeking asylum, our expert advisors will assist you throughout the whole application process. We offer a free no obligation consultation, so call us now on 0208 432 3350. That's 0208 432 3350, or visit us at 298 Romford Road, London, E79HD.
People of Asian and Black ethnic origin are at an increased risk of COVID-19. Queen Mary University London has launched a research study called Covidence UK to find out why this is. If you are Black or Asian, we need your help to complete our studies. All you need to do is complete an online survey. Please help us to understand the coronavirus disease so we can develop tools to prevent it. Sign up at qmul.ac.uk/Covidence. Sign up and save lives.
If you want to advertise your business on Revive FM, then visit www.revivefm.co.uk. Alternatively, contact our sales team now on 079 44 56 5616. That's 079 44 56 5616.
Hi there, warm welcome from myself, Tej. Today we'll be talking about COVID-19 vaccines. The good news is the rollout of the vaccine program is now in full swing with millions already vaccinated. We know, though, there are some questions amongst our communities about COVID-19 vaccines. Once more, we have Dr. Dilsher Singh, GP at Enki Medical Practice in Birmingham, joining us today and advising on the importance of having the vaccine and how they actually protect us.
Thank you, Tej. It's great to be here again. See, these vaccines are a big step forward in our fight against the virus. I would say the single most crucial point for our community to realize is that it's much more safer for your immune system to learn how to protect itself through a vaccine than by contracting COVID-19.
Dr. Dilsherji, can you remind our listeners how vaccines actually work in the body?
Tej, medically, it is well established that vaccines work by causing an immune response, which happens in 4 to 5 weeks. These vaccines itself trigger a response in a person's immune system.
Moving on slightly, I think a lot of people, including myself, would like to know more about the side effects of the vaccines currently being deployed.
Of course, Tej, this is understandable. Like with all vaccines and medicines, it is possible you may experience mild side effects after your COVID-19 vaccine. However, most side effects are very mild and only last a short time. They may include sore arm, feeling tired, headache, a general achy feeling, or being sick.
Got another question. Is it possible some side effects have not been discovered yet?
When we look at the history of vaccines and the side effects they may cause, all becomes apparent within a few weeks of trialing the vaccine. It is possible that rare side effects can come to light as more people are vaccinated. But it's highly probable that these would have been picked up in the clinical trials of 40 to 50,000 patients coming from all walks of life. My final piece of advice to the community is that they should absolutely have the vaccine and tell others to do the same. They can feel fully confident and reassured about the safety aspects.
Thank you, Dr. Dilsher. As always, excellent advice. I'm ready and waiting to be invited for my COVID vaccination. Just remember, guys, vaccines are only ever made available when they've been approved for use. They have to meet the strict safety and effectiveness criteria set out by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. The MHRA have confirmed the COVID vaccines do not contain any components of animal origin. For more information, you can visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccine. Let's look after ourselves and one another.
Revive FM
94.0 on the radio,
on your mobile,
and online.
And welcome back, David. You're on the other screen there for some reason. I don't know. Well, thank you for staying with us. And have you had any time to look at this? There's a new bill, the Police Crime and Sentencing Courts Bill, which proposes quite a few number of changes to sentencing and basically I think what they're trying to do is have longer sentences. Just wondering whether you had any views on that.
He's on mute. He's on mute. Tell him. He's muted himself. No, tell him he's muted himself.
Oh, I see.
Sorry. Is that better? I'm sorry. I may.
Sure. No,
Am I now?
I can hear you now. So
you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
No, you were asking me about sentencing being increased.
Yeah.
There's a great difficulty with that because, no doubt, from a political point of view, that may well be attractive. But it seems to me that there must be a better way of dealing with people who are breaking the law, other than spending huge amounts of money locking them up and running the risk of destroying. When you lock a person up, the knock-on effect on that person's family and the community and so on and so forth is huge. I am sure that with our ingenuity as a country, we can find a better way of stopping crime, which is hugely important. Rather than stopping crime, we can find a better way of doing that than simply getting anybody who ticks a particular box, sticking him in prison for X number of years because that is what the guidelines say we must have to do, and you then just fill your prisons up. What that doesn't take into account is that these days, for example, one of the things that everyone reads about are county lines, and these are drugs dealers in, shall we say, London, get all their stuff in from abroad, and then they ship them out to different parts of the country. In those parts of the country, the local judges are very keen. This mustn't happen in my area. So they give ever increasingly bigger sentences. But the people they're dealing with are not, 9 times out of 10, they're not the main guys at all.
Yeah.
They are very often people who have been hooked onto a particular drug, who are then, now that you're hooked on the drug, you owe me a lot of money. All those drugs that you haven't paid for them. I'll tell you how you can pay for them. You can pay for them by doing this little job for me. No, it's only a little job. And of course, that's how it starts. And very often the people who are actually going from A to B are themselves victims of the drugs themselves. I mean, these drugs are pernicious. We must find a better way of dealing with not just the drugs problem, but the whole problem of modern behavior than by sending people to prison. I mean, people arm themselves with knives. Now, I was going to say in my day, that may well date me, but in my day, kids would not have knives.
Yeah.
I mean, they might have a pen knife, but they would use that for sharpening their pencils. Now, it doesn't matter what the level of sentencing is. They see on the internet a lot of violence being depicted, and they somehow feel that it's okay to go about with a knife in public.
Yeah.
The trouble with going about with a knife in public is somebody's going to get stabbed. When somebody is stabbed, there's a very good chance that somebody's going to die. And then all of a sudden, you've got a whole range of I mean, we have to call them murderers because they have, if they are guilty, they have knowingly killed somebody and meant to do that. That's the crime of murder. How are we going to deal with them? Stick them inside forever. And the prisons are then, filling up. And that there has to be a way of getting through to people that they cannot carry knives.
Yes.
And the only way that we seem to be getting through or not getting through at the moment is simply by increasing the sentences. And I think that's, I'm not in favor of anybody carrying a knife, but with our ingenuity as a country, and we are an ingenious country, with our ingenuity as a country, we must be able to find a way of resolving the huge social problems that come about with knives, with drugs. We must be able to find a way of dealing with that.
That's right. And I think the emphasis should be on rehabilitation rather than punishment.
Yes. Rehabilitation, it's re-education in a sense. But I think the problem is that, I mean, I don't want to blame all of this on the internet, but there is no doubt that if anyone wants to tune into something violent and to gang culture, gang culture is very available. Even if the gangs are, they're not the local gangs that live on this estate or that estate. They're gangs that might live on different galaxies, but they are nevertheless gang against gang. And once you get that and you reduce it to the absolute stupidity, you get postcode wars. I live in this postcode, whatever it may be, ABC1. Oh, you live in ABC2, right? You're therefore an enemy because we're going to have a postcode war. I mean, crazy.
Crazy. Yes.
And yet there is a huge amount of that goes on. And people are drawn into this because they want to belong. I want to belong because I feel left out. I want to belong, therefore I'm going to join a gang. And then all of a sudden you have to justify, well, in order to join this gang, there's an initiation rite. You've got to go round and do whatever you've got to do. And all of a sudden you get people being drawn into a criminal culture simply because they've got nothing else. I was going to say they've got nothing else to do, but somehow education seems to have moved on, and doesn't seem to be. I mean, I'm probably very out of date, but certainly when I was at school, and I don't advocate this in the modern day, but when I was at school, corporal punishment was abundant. And the advantage of that was that you knew where the parameters were. And you learnt at an early stage, I mustn't do this because there will be punishment that I don't want waiting for me. And I suppose, the schools that I went to had that. And it taught people, the parameters of what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. You take that away. I'm not saying I'm not an advocate of corporal punishment at all. But once you take that away, you've got to find something else that works.
Yes.
And I'm, as I say, I'm not an advocate because all it does is encourages, oh, well, it's all right to go around hitting people smaller than yourself. No, it isn't. So the modern move against corporal punishment, I can see exactly where it's come from, but we haven't substituted for that an effective method of discipline. And I suppose, I don't know, maybe there should be a think tank.
Yes. No, certainly. I mean, unfortunately, the youths of today, they're just not made of the sort of same stuff that people were, say, 20, 30 years ago, and it's manifestly evident by virtue of all these statistics which show that they have no qualms about sticking a knife into another human being's body.
Well, I think it's the environment that people are brought up in, and all of a sudden, all the things that, in a sense, that we had. I mean, we had discipline. And I mean, I remember I got into terrible trouble at school for climbing out of a window. Now, the reason I got into big trouble was not the fact of climbing out of the window. It was before I climbed out of the window, I looked left and I looked right, which demonstrated that I knew I shouldn't be climbing out of the window.
Right.
And I got caught. And
your mens rea was exposed.
Well, there you are. And the lesson that I learned was not so much don't get caught. It was, I learned a lesson there, so that here I am years and years and years after the event, still remembering that I can remember which window I climbed out of, at which particular school.
Sure.
And, and I got into trouble for it. And I learned. And I think what we're doing now, I think the education system has abandoned any idea of disciplining its participants. And indeed, if you try and discipline a child, the child's parents will come steaming in and say, "What are you doing? Bullying my child or whatever." And all of a sudden, the complete lack of discipline has its knock-on effects, and we haven't put anything in its place to discourage idiots. And that's what they are. They're bringing themselves down to the level of idiocy by taking a knife out with them. I mean, crazy.
Of course. And one other factor, perhaps, which may be important, is that unfortunately, a lot of young people play games such as grand auto theft. In grand auto theft, they actually assume the role of a robber or someone that's going to do some burglary. And I think day in, day out of playing these sort of games desensitizes young people. And they're no longer aware of the rightness and wrongness of these acts. And so that's why when they go out, in the wide world, and they can do the same thing without any, second thought.
Yes. I mean, in the olden days, we used to play Cluedo. Now, okay, behind every game of Cluedo, somebody was murdered. Was it Miss So-and-so with the candlestick in the drawing room, or,
Yeah.
But that was very much a game. Whereas, I mean, you're right. I think I've never watched Grand Auto Theft, but I'm quite certain that it is realistic. And it will make somebody who feels excluded. That's how I can get included. I can join in this sort of activity. Good Lord, there's some of it going on my estate. I'm going to join those guys.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you get good people from, with good caring parents getting drawn into, getting sucked into a life that turns out to be a life of crime and a life of huge disappointment. And I mean, I've spent my whole life in crime, and it's utterly fascinating. But it's fascinating for the same reason that people, love watching murder things on television, and they love reading Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And I've got one or two parents who refer to me as here's Sherlock Holmes at it again, because I look for things and I discover things. But what is fascinating to me actually shouldn't, I would love there to be no crime and for me to be completely out of work because people have given up on crime. But as long as they're there and crimes are being committed, then there is a need for analysts and for people to make sure that the right people get convicted and the wrong people don't get convicted.
Oh, yes, yeah. And I'm sure the solicitor must be playing the Watson role in your...
Well, you see, the great trouble is that the way it's structured these days, I mean, solicitors have to run their office. Yeah. They've got staff. They've got an office to run. They've got windows to clean. They've got books to buy. They've got a lot of expenses.
Yeah.
And the way that remuneration, and particularly in crime, works is that you're almost paid by the page. And so all of a sudden, I find people writing to me saying, would you write an advice that all the telephone bills, all the telephone, thousands and thousands of pages of calls, that those are all served? Because once they're served, they'll be paid for.
Yeah.
There'll be a justification for me putting in, for the solicitor putting in a huge bill. And that's got to be wrong. And that comes about because the pay rates have sunk and sunk, and they haven't been increased for 8 years.
Yeah.
And the net result is that a lot of people simply look at a case and say, I've got all these overheads to pay. Can I afford to do this sort of case, which is in payment terms rubbish? No, I can't. I'm going to do something which has got a lot of page counts. I'm going to concentrate on frauds. I'm going to make sure that I get paid, that I charge for all these millions of pages of telephone stuff. And all of a sudden you've lost what you're there for. I mean, I see that what I'm there for is I'm essentially a problem solver. You have a problem. I may have a solution, particularly if somebody's got your problem wrong, or better still, they've got you wrong.
Yes.
And that's where we go into, and when you get these miscarriages, I mean, they are just horrible. And they come about as a result of enormous, it's just huge coincidences that nobody, I mean, I can tell you an extraordinary story of a coincidence. I shall change the names, but just to give you an idea, little old lady murdered in a house in a distant from me in London, distant part of the country, and murdered by a team who come in and they switch the electricity off. That's their MO, their modus operandi. So the police immediately look at teams who hit lonely houses and switch the electricity off. And what do you know? There are, say, 3 in the country. This was a long time ago. Say 3 in the country. One of them is local to this area. That's what's happened to this lady. We think we know who's done it. Fine. And as it happens, it wasn't a deserted house. What she was doing, she was watching the snooker. It looked like a deserted house. All of a sudden, they come in, switch the lights off, off goes the television. So she wanders around and gets hit by somebody and killed. And the terrible thing is, when they try and find out when she died, the guy reading the meter actually misread the meter and he came up with the wrong day.
I see.
He just got it wrong by 1 day. And the people who they knew were responsible for this had an absolute alibi. I don't know what it was. They were signing out at another police station 100 miles away. They had a complete alibi. And so what they did is they said, all right, well, it couldn't have been them. It must have been one of their known associates. And they come up with the name of Peter Collingwood, known associate. Now, I've invented the name Peter Collingwood. And then suddenly one of them says, not Peter Collingwood. We've got a Peter Collingwood who is driving his car past the little old lady's house at exactly the right time. That's your man. And they arrest him. And they don't have much evidence against him, but thank you very much, they get him convicted. There's only one small problem. The person who was driving past was actually going up to give a 90th birthday present to a little old man who lives up the road. And that's what he was doing. And his name was Peter David Collingwood. The known associate was Peter John Collingwood. Ouch. Wrong person.
Yes.
Massive coincidence. And as a result of that, the person called Peter David Collingwood, the nice guy who was taking it up, ended up at your expense, if you're a taxpayer, serving a life sentence. He was in prison for goodness knows how long. And that was that. So these awful coincidences do happen, and it's left to the criminal justice system to get the good guys out.
Of course, yes. Well, that's been absolutely fascinating, David. I mean, we've actually run out of time now.
I've been rabbiting on.
but thank you very much. We must have you back on again soon. Thank you very much for your time with us today. And you're a great advocate, not only in your profession, but also for the bar and for barristers. So for the profession itself. So thank you very much, and hope to speak to you again soon.
Well, many thanks. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Okay, that's all. Good night. That's all for today for the Mahtab Aziz Celebrity Lawyer Show, and hope to see you back here next Tuesday at 5 p.m. So take care and goodbye to you all. This is Revive FM 94.0.
If you